The restaurant was busy that night. The lights warmed the atmosphere, the voices of the patrons filled the room with lively conversations, and the aroma of grilled meats, garlic, and fresh herbs spread through the air. To anyone who entered, it seemed like a welcoming place, where exquisite food and impeccable service guaranteed a memorable experience. But the truth is that not everything that glitters is gold. Seated in one of the corners of the restaurant without any fanfare was the owner himself. He wasn't wearing his usual formal attire, nor did he draw attention with his presence. He wore a simple hoodie and jeans, blending unnoticed among the other patrons. His intention wasn't to dine or be recognized, but rather to observe. Since he had opened that restaurant, he knew that numbers and performance reports only told part of the story. A business might seem prosperous on paper, but the real truth was found behind the scenes, in the way the employees were treated, in how they felt working there. That was why, from time to time, he made secret visits, mingling with the customers to feel the atmosphere from the inside out. That night, at first glance, everything seemed to be going well. The waiters moved quickly between tables. The dishes arrived flawlessly to the guests, and the ambiance of the place remained sophisticated yet welcoming. However, something caught his attention. Near the corridor that led to the kitchen, a muffled and discreet sound stood out among the hum of the room. It wasn't a loud or dramatic noise, but a restrained cry, the kind someone lets out when desperately trying not to be noticed. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw, partially hidden behind a metal counter, a young employee. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and her fingers gripped the edge of the counter as if she were trying to steady herself. Next to her, a co-worker spoke softly, in a concerned tone. The sight was enough to trigger an alarm in his mind. He had been in the business world long enough to recognize the difference between fatigue and fear. And what he saw there wasn't just the exhaustion of a long workday. It was something deeper, something wrong. He decided not to act immediately. Instead, he calmly walked over to the bar, sitting on one of the stools while ordering a glass of water. His mind, however, was racing. Discreetly, he observed the scene once more. The young woman continued to look visibly upset, while the co-worker by her side tried to comfort her. But there was something more to that situation, something he had not yet fully understood. It was then that he noticed the presence of the restaurant's manager, a man with a rigid posture, wearing a dark blue shirt. He was standing near the reception, watching everything with sharp eyes. But what struck him most was the way his presence affected the employees. None of them seemed at ease when he passed by. There was tension in the air, something that wasn't common in a healthy work environment. When the waiter who had been talking with the young woman returned to the room, he noticed his tense expression and restless hands, adjusting his apron as he hurried along. This was his chance to get some answers. With firm steps, he approached the young employee and, in a friendly tone, asked if he could borrow a pen. The young man blinked a few times before picking one up from the counter and handing it to him. But the restaurant owner didn't leave immediately. "Tyler," he said, reading the name on the employee's badge. "I noticed that your friend over there seems a bit upset. Is she all right?" Tyler's reaction was immediate. He hesitated, averting his gaze for a brief moment, as if searching for the right words. But in the end, he replied too quickly, as if wanting to close the subject. "Yes, she's fine." He knew that wasn't true. "She doesn't seem fine," he insisted, maintaining a low and discreet tone. Tyler swallowed hard. His gaze shifted for a brief moment in the direction of the manager in the dark blue shirt. The simple act of looking at him before answering said it all. After an awkward silence, Tyler took a deep breath and finally admitted, "She's not fine." That confirmation only reinforced his suspicions. The question now was to understand exactly what was happening. But before he could continue the conversation, he noticed someone approaching. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The air grew heavier, charged with the dominant presence of the manager. "Any problem here?" the man asked, his voice polite but laden with authority. Tyler immediately lowered his head and pretended to be busy with the plates in front of him. The restaurant owner turned slowly, coming face to face with the manager for the first time. The man maintained a neutral expression, but his eyes said otherwise. He was the type of person who knew exactly the control he had over others, and he enjoyed it. The name on the badge gleamed under the ambient light. Rick Calloway. "May I help you with something?" Calloway asked, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No, thank you," he replied, keeping a casual tone. "I just needed a pen, and Tyler was kind enough to help me." Calloway maintained his fixed gaze for a few seconds before giving a slight smile. "Great. Let's stay focused on work then." He gave Tyler a firm pat on the shoulder, and Tyler quickly nodded, not daring to look up. As Calloway walked away, the restaurant owner knew that he had found the real problem. Something there was deeply wrong. He stepped out for a moment, breathing in the fresh night air. His mind worked quickly, analyzing the situation. He couldn't accuse the manager without concrete evidence. He needed more information, something that confirmed his suspicions. It was then that, as if fate were on his side, one of the employees went out for a break. The bartender. He was leaning against the wall outside, fiddling with his cell phone, not noticing his approach. Seizing the opportunity, he walked over to the young man, maintaining a relaxed posture. "Busy night, huh?" The bartender looked up and gave a small smile. "It's always like this on Fridays." "Can I ask you a question?" he continued, keeping a casual tone. "Your manager, Calloway, what is he like?" The bartender's expression changed immediately. His posture stiffened, and his hesitation in answering only confirmed what he already suspected. "He's not just strict," he finally said. "He likes to control people, especially Emily." The mention of the young woman's name made the restaurant owner's stomach turn. "What does he do with her?" The bartender sighed. "He always makes her stay late, and he always speaks to her in a strange way, as if she owed him something. I've seen it before, and she never says anything, but she doesn't need to. We all see it." That was enough for him to make his decision. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Thank you for telling me." The young man said nothing, but from his look he seemed relieved to finally speak the truth. Now that he knew what was really happening, he wasn't going to wait any longer. The restaurant was still operating, but the rush was beginning to fade. Some customers were finishing their meals and preparing to leave, while the staff cleaned tables and organized the room for closing. Despite the appearance of normalcy, he now saw everything with different eyes. Emily wasn't just a stressed-out employee, and Calloway wasn't just a demanding manager. There was something deeper there, something rooted in fear and control. Without wasting any time, he went back inside and headed straight to Emily, who was organizing the order pads at the reception. Upon noticing his approach, she shrank slightly, as if expecting trouble. "I need to speak with you," he said without beating around the bush. Emily blinked, surprised. "Sir, I'm in the middle of my shift." "I know, but it's important." She glanced aside, as if searching for an escape, and for a brief moment her gaze fell on Calloway, who remained near the reception, attentive to everything. He didn't need anything more to confirm that she was afraid. "Just a minute," he insisted. She hesitated, but then took a deep breath and nodded. They walked to a more secluded corner of the room, where he finally spoke with complete clarity. "I know what's happening here." Emily's eyes widened, and she immediately shook her head. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but you do," he countered without changing his tone. "You're afraid of him." She swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. I can't do anything." "You can. He leaves, but you don't." Her eyes returned to him, wide open. "What?" Before she could respond, a shadow loomed next to them. Calloway. Any problem here? The manager's voice was laden with false cordiality, but his gaze was sharp. The restaurant owner turned calmly and smiled. No, just talking. Emily has work to do. The young woman visibly shrank. It was then that he decided it was time to end it. With a calm gesture, he took his wallet out of his pocket and opened it, revealing the executive badge that confirmed his identity. My name is restaurant owner's name. I am the owner of this place. The room fell silent. The employees nearby froze, exchanging surprised glances. Calloway paled. And we need to have a conversation. Now. The manager hesitated, but saw there was no escape. He swallowed hard and nodded. The two went to the office at the back of the restaurant. Calloway still tried to maintain his composure, but his confidence was visibly shaken. As soon as they entered, he attempted to regain control of the situation. Sir, I can explain. There's no need, the restaurant owner interrupted, his voice firm. I already know everything. Calloway blinked a few times, feigning surprise. I don't know what you're talking about. The restaurant owner picked up his cell phone and pressed a button. A recording began to play. Emily's voice, low and trembling, echoed through the office. If I don't do what he says, I'm out. And then, Tyler's response. He doesn't own you. The color drained from Calloway's face. That was taken out of context. No, that is exactly the context. The manager tried to say something, but couldn't find the words. The restaurant owner picked up the phone again and made a call. Human Resources Department, we need to talk. Calloway's silence said it all. His reign was over. When he left the office, all the employees were waiting in the dining room. Emily, Tyler, Nate, and the others looked at him with anxious eyes. He took a deep breath and delivered the news. He's gone. Emily's shoulders relaxed. For the first time that night, she exhaled without seeming to carry the weight of the world. What happens now? Nate asked. Now, we ensure that this never happens again. He looked at each of the employees, making sure his message was clear. If something is wrong, you speak up. You're not alone. The silence was broken when Tyler stepped forward. This wasn't just about Calloway, he said, his voice laden with emotion. The problem is much bigger than one manager. Nate nodded. We always felt like we had no choice. Emily took a deep breath. I wanted to leave so many times, but I thought it was normal. The restaurant owner looked at each of them and nodded. This ends today. That night, as he watched the employees closing up the restaurant, he reflected on everything that had happened. This was just a restaurant, a manager, a team, but how many other places were like this? How many Emilys still believed they were alone? The problem wasn't just Calloway, the problem was a system that allowed people like him to thrive. He knew he couldn't change the world, but he could change what was within his reach, and he would do just that. As he got into his car that night, he didn't just feel relief for having solved a problem within his own restaurant. He felt a greater unease, a weight in his chest at the thought of how many other places still harbored bosses like Calloway. How many people lived trapped by fear, not believing there was a way out. The power wasn't just in the numbers, the profits, or the restaurant's reputation. The true power lay in the people who kept it running, and from that night on, he was sure of one thing: no employee in his restaurant would ever feel alone again.